The human fleet moved slowly through the edge of the known galaxy, a line of ships that had been prepared for years for this journey. Outside the protective hulls, space stretched into an endless dark canvas, dotted with stars that seemed brighter than anyone had ever seen before. It was quiet, almost unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that made even the most experienced crew members hold their breath. For centuries, humans had explored nearby systems, mapping planets, studying stars, and learning the rhythms of the galaxy. But this was different. This was uncharted territory, a place where no human had ever gone before, a place simply called the Dominion. No one knew exactly what to expect. Some imagined vast civilizations of alien beings. Others thought it might be a lifeless expanse of dangerous radiation and black holes. The scientists on the fleet spent hours analyzing every sensor reading, every faint signal, but there was almost nothing. The emptiness itself was a presence heavy and strange. It was the kind of silence that made people listen to their own breathing and the hum of the ship's engines, as if every sound could be a warning. Despite the unknown, humans moved forward. There was a confidence that came from experience, from knowing that fear could never be allowed to stop progress. Every crew member understood the risk, but they also understood something more important. Exploration was in their nature. They had crossed vast distances before, faced dangers that no other species had, and survived. This mission was no different, at least to them. As the fleet advanced, the view outside the windows began to change. Stars no longer looked like distant lights. They seemed closer, sharper, and almost alive. Nebulas swirled with colors that no telescope had ever captured in detail, glowing greens and blues that painted the void like some unimaginable artwork. Strange gravitational waves made the sensors flicker, and small asteroids floated by, untouched by any orbit, as if drifting on invisible currents. Some of the younger crew members whispered to each other that it felt like stepping into a dream. Others stayed silent, feeling a strange weight in their chest, a mixture of awe and something harder to describe. Communication between the ships was careful. Every signal sent to Earth was precise. Every message meant to confirm safety and share data. For hours there was only static, then short bursts of feedback. The Dominion did not respond, at least not in a way humans could understand. The lack of contact was unsettling, but no one panicked. Humans had faced isolation in deep space before, and they had learned that patience was just as important as courage. The crew began routines that had been practiced for years. Scientists monitored the readings. Engineers checked systems, and the pilots kept the fleet in formation. Each person knew their role, and there was a sense of unity that came from shared purpose. Even in the midst of uncertainty, humans adapted. They calculated trajectories that avoided unknown gravitational anomalies. They adjusted shields for energy waves they could not identify, and they logged every tiny change in the environment. Every piece of data could be the difference between survival and disaster. As night cycles passed aboard the ships, a quiet, nervous energy grew. The crew could not see it, but somewhere in the Dominion, unseen forces might be observing them. No one knew if they were being watched, if the emptiness was truly empty, or if something waited silently just beyond sensors' reach. The idea of being observed was uncomfortable, yet it did not paralyze them. Humans have always had a stubborn streak, a refusal to bow to fear, and it carried them forward. Finally, the first glimpses of alien worlds appeared on the long-range scanners. They were not like any planets humans had studied before. Some were larger than Jupiter, with swirling storms covering the surface like living paintings. Others glowed faintly in strange colors, casting shadows into space itself. Each new reading brought both excitement and caution. Every member of the fleet understood that discovery was never safe. They also understood that turning back was not an option. The first human fleet entering the Dominion was more than a mission. It was a statement, a testament to human resilience and curiosity. Each crew member felt it in their own way, whether as pride, as fear, or as a mix of both. As they moved deeper into the unknown, the darkness outside felt less like emptiness and more like a challenge, something to meet head-on. Even as doubts crept into minds, the quiet, the isolation, the unending void, the humans did not falter. Every ship moved forward with steady determination. Every sensor reading, every calculation, every cautious maneuver was part of a larger story. Humans were crossing into territory that no one else had dared, and they were unshaken. Hours turned into days, and still there was no sign of life. The fleet continued its journey, and the people aboard began to feel the weight of what they were doing. They were not only exploring for science or survival, they were stepping into history. Every careful decision, every small adjustment, every silent observation would be recorded and remembered. For the first time in generations, humans were not just observers of the galaxy. They were participants in a cosmic stage that no one had yet defined. And though the Dominion seemed silent, though the void stretched endlessly around them, the humans moved forward with one thought in common. They would meet the unknown, and they would meet it unshaken. It was the beginning of something vast, something that no one aboard the fleet could fully understand, but humans did not need to understand everything to move forward. They only needed courage, determination, and the unshakable knowledge that turning back was never the human way. And with that, the fleet pressed on, deeper into the Dominion than any human had ever dared. The human fleet moved deeper into the Dominion, and the sense of isolation grew stronger. The darkness outside the ship seemed heavier now, almost like it had a presence of its own. The stars were fewer here, scattered like distant sparks in a vast black sea, and every ship felt smaller, more fragile in the overwhelming emptiness. Humans had expected the unknown, but the Dominion was something beyond expectation. It was not merely space. It was a region that felt alive in ways no one could explain. For days, the fleet remained silent, sending only minimal communications to Earth, reports that could be read and studied but offered no reassurance. The Dominion had not responded to any signals. No light, no movement, no sign of life. At first, the crew thought it was just the vast emptiness of uncharted space, but slowly a creeping thought began to spread among them. Perhaps they were being watched. Perhaps something beyond their understanding had noticed their presence. The first test of this theory came quietly. Sensors aboard the lead ship detected subtle shifts in energy fields, patterns that seemed too deliberate to be natural. Small bursts of radiation appeared and disappeared, moving in ways that did not match any known astronomical phenomenon. Engineers and scientists worked to interpret the signals, analyzing them from every angle. They could not tell whether it was a natural anomaly, a weapon, or something far stranger. Despite the uncertainty, the humans did not retreat. Fear was present, yes, but it was tempered by a determination that had been built over centuries. Humans were explorers. They had crossed oceans, deserts, and planets with more hostile environments than this. They had faced dangers that were impossible to predict and had survived. This was just another challenge, and the human mind thrived on challenges. Some crews reported strange occurrences. Lights on the ships would flicker for no reason, and equipment would behave unpredictably. In one instance, a probe sent to scan a small asteroid simply vanished without a trace. The data it had gathered was transmitted back for a few moments before the signal disappeared, leaving nothing behind. It was as if the Dominion itself were testing them, probing for weaknesses or observing how they reacted. In the command centers of the ships, the tension was palpable. Humans were not used to being so uncertain, yet their response was calm professionalism. Orders were given carefully, strategies were debated in detail, and everyone understood that any mistake could have severe consequences. Still, the crew remained curious. Every anomaly, every unexplained event was recorded, studied, and treated as an opportunity to learn. The Dominion remained quiet, but it was not inactive. A series of energy pulses began to ripple across space near the fleet. At first they were small, harmless enough to be ignored. But then the pulses grew stronger, moving faster and interacting with the fleet's systems. Sensors would spike and drop, shields would flicker, and navigation instruments would behave unpredictably. Some crews felt a chill as if the void itself were pressing against them. Even so, humans adapted. They adjusted their shields, recalibrated sensors, and changed their flight patterns to compensate for the unpredictable pulses. No panic arose, only focus. Humans had always been resilient, able to improvise and respond to circumstances no matter how strange or dangerous. They worked in shifts, analyzing the pulses, trying to understand them, and gradually patterns began to emerge. It was subtle, but the fleet realized that the pulses were not random. They were testing movement, predicting paths, and seemingly measuring human responses. The Dominion did not attack in a way humans expected, but it acted in ways that forced them to think differently. Strategy and adaptability became the key to survival, more than firepower or speed. The humans understood that brute force would not win here. Only cleverness, patience, and careful observation would allow them to endure. Crew members shared whispered thoughts during rare moments of quiet. Some said it felt as if the Dominion were alive, a vast intelligence hidden in the void observing their every move. Others argued that perhaps this region had been abandoned long ago, and the pulses were echoes of some ancient system still functioning on instinct. But there was no certainty. Humans had learned long ago that certainty was a luxury in exploration. They moved forward anyway, guided by experience, training, and trust in each other. The first real encounter with Dominion forces happened slowly. Small unmanned constructs appeared on the edge of sensors, barely detectable at first. They moved like shadows, almost invisible against the dark backdrop of space. When humans tried to communicate or approach them, the constructs would shift away or vanish entirely, leaving only faint energy readings behind. The fleet realized that these were not simple machines. They were observing, responding, and adapting. Despite this, humans remained unshaken. The fleet adjusted tactics, using unpredictable maneuvers, varying speeds, and erratic formations to confuse the Dominion constructs. The humans learned quickly, improvising strategies that no algorithm could have predicted. Each encounter was brief but intense, requiring split-second decisions and full cooperation among the crews. Gradually, the humans began to understand the rhythm of these strange observers, and they adapted in ways that allowed them to continue moving forward. The psychological pressure was immense. Crew members faced long hours of monotony punctuated by sudden, intense moments of uncertainty. The darkness outside pressed against the windows, and even the most experienced navigators admitted to feeling small and vulnerable. Yet there was also exhilaration. Humans had entered a space that no one else had dared. They were pioneers, standing on the edge of a frontier that had remained untouched for eons. In the command rooms, leaders emphasized patience and calm. No rash decisions were allowed. Every move was calculated, every observation logged. Humans understood that survival here depended not on aggression, but on awareness and adaptability, and so the fleet continued its cautious journey, each day learning more about the Dominion's patterns, each day discovering new challenges to overcome. A breakthrough came when a small ship successfully intercepted one of the Dominion constructs. Using careful maneuvering, the humans managed to get close enough to scan it thoroughly. The data revealed something astonishing. The constructs were partially autonomous but linked to a network far larger than anything humans had ever encountered. They operated on predictive algorithms that could calculate possibilities far beyond human comprehension, but they were not perfect. Humans could introduce unpredictability, exploit gaps, and maneuver in ways the Dominion did not anticipate. The realization brought a mixture of relief and determination. Humans could not overpower the Dominion, but they could outthink it in small, clever ways. The fleet began to experiment with patterns of movement, timing, and energy emissions, testing what the Dominion could detect and how it would react. Every experiment was a risk, but each risk brought knowledge, and knowledge was survival. At the same time, humans faced internal challenges. The isolation, the strange anomalies, and the constant pressure began to affect morale. Some crew members struggled with fear, others with doubt, and a few even questioned the purpose of venturing so far into the unknown. Leaders focused on keeping spirits high, emphasizing teamwork, curiosity, and the pride of being pioneers. Humans had always faced adversity and uncertainty, and the Dominion was just another test. Days turned into weeks, and the fleet continued its slow advance. The Dominion's response never escalated into open attacks, but the energy pulses and constructs remained persistent. Humans adapted continuously, learning to move with caution and creativity, studying every anomaly and using each encounter as a lesson. Slowly, a rhythm emerged, a fragile balance between exploration and defense, observation and adaptation. In the quiet moments, crew members would look out into the void and feel both small and significant at the same time. They were tiny beings in an immense, mysterious space, yet their actions mattered. Every calculation, every maneuver, every decision was part of a larger story that no one had ever written before. Humans were shaping their own path in a place that had never known them, and that was extraordinary. The Dominion remained a mystery. Its intelligence, its motives, its purpose, all were unknown. But humans had learned something vital. Fear could not drive them, only observation, ingenuity, and persistence. The fleet was no longer just moving through space. It was navigating a complex, living puzzle, one that required patience, courage, and the unshakable human spirit. By the end of these weeks, the humans had grown stronger, more confident, and more unified. They had faced the unknown, adapted to it, and survived. Each encounter with the Dominion constructs had taught them a little more about the vast intelligence they were up against. Each anomaly had forced them to think, to adjust, and to trust in their own ingenuity. They had crossed into a place no human had ever entered, and though the challenges were immense, they were unshaken. And so, the fleet pressed onward, deeper into the Dominion, aware that every step brought new dangers, new questions, and new opportunities. They were explorers, pioneers, and survivors, moving steadily through a space that had been untouched for eons. They did not yet understand the full nature of the Dominion, but they were determined to continue. Humans were here, and they were unshaken. The human fleet had been moving through the Dominion for weeks. Each day brought new anomalies, new energy readings, and new challenges that tested every skill the crew possessed. Yet nothing could have prepared them for the sight that appeared on the long-range sensors one morning. Far ahead, floating in the void, was a structure unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was enormous, so large that even the combined fleet seemed tiny beside it. The shape was irregular, jagged in some places, smooth in others, and glowing faintly with energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. At first, no one knew what to make of it. The scanners struggled to interpret its size, its composition, or even its purpose. There were no recognizable patterns, no familiar shapes from human engineering or nature. The structure seemed alive, as if it had grown over centuries, responding to forces humans could not perceive. Scientists and engineers gathered around consoles, analyzing the data, yet every explanation seemed insufficient. The fleet slowed as they approached, each ship maintaining a careful distance. Communication with Earth continued, though messages were delayed and brief, full of cautionary notes and descriptions of the incredible sight. The commanders reminded the crews that curiosity had always been humanity's driving force. They had crossed dangerous deserts, oceans, and planets for discovery, and now they faced a mystery on a scale beyond comprehension. The unknown structure was another challenge, and humans had never shied from challenges. As they drew closer, the crew could see faint movements around the structure. Tiny energy bursts flickered along its surface like lights turning on and off in a vast city. There was no sound, of course. Space was silent, but every crew member felt a sense of tension, a hum of anticipation that seemed to vibrate through the hulls of the ships. It was as if the structure itself was aware of their presence, observing and waiting for the humans to make the next move. The first decision was whether to send an exploratory ship inside or to remain at a safe distance. After long debates, they agreed on a cautious approach. A single smaller vessel, equipped with advanced sensors and protective shielding, would enter first, while the main fleet remained on alert nearby. The crew aboard the ship felt a mixture of excitement and fear. They had trained for situations like this, but nothing in training could fully prepare anyone for a first encounter with something completely unknown. As the exploratory ship entered the structure, the sensors went wild. Energy readings fluctuated unpredictably, and the navigation system struggled to keep a stable path. The walls of the structure were not solid in the way humans expected. They appeared semi-transparent in some areas, glowing with an inner light that shifted constantly. In other areas, massive mechanical structures stretched for kilometers, moving with a precision that suggested intelligence and purpose. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Inside, the ship passed through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Gravity fluctuated slightly, enough to make movement unusual but not dangerous. The walls and floors were covered in symbols and patterns that made no sense to humans. They were not letters or numbers, at least not in any human language. It was as if the structure itself was trying to communicate in a code beyond their understanding. The crew recorded everything, knowing that even small details could hold the key to understanding this place. The more they explored, the more they realized that the structure was not just a building or a ship. It was a network, a living system of energy and machines operating together with a logic humans could barely comprehend. It seemed to anticipate the exploratory ship's movements, opening pathways in some directions while closing others, creating a sense of guidance, but also of testing. Every step forward required attention, caution, and adaptability. Outside, the fleet watched closely. Sensors detected faint energy pulses, small ripples that spread through space around the structure. The Dominion constructs that had been shadowing the humans before now remained stationary, observing. It was clear that this structure was a central point, a hub or perhaps a command center of some kind. Humans had entered a place that no other species had touched in centuries, if not millennia. Every movement, every calculation, and every adjustment could determine whether they would succeed or fail. The crew aboard the exploratory ship began to notice strange temporal effects. Time seemed to stretch and compress in different sections of the structure. Clocks and instruments displayed conflicting readings, and even the perception of time among the crew became uneven. What felt like minutes inside might have been hours outside. It was disorienting, but they pressed on, knowing that exploration required endurance and focus. As they reached a central chamber, the structure revealed something even more astonishing. Enormous machinery floated without support, rotating slowly, glowing with a soft inner light. Energy streams connected different parts of the chamber like rivers of light. The scale of it was almost incomprehensible, and the crew felt small, insignificant in the face of such a creation. And yet, they were not afraid in the way humans usually feared danger. There was a strange respect, a recognition of intelligence and complexity that demanded careful observation rather than aggression. Sensors began to pick up signals that hinted at patterns, almost like communication. It was not language as humans knew it, but data flows that suggested processing, observation, and awareness. The structure was not inert. It was thinking, calculating, and responding. Humans realized that they were not just exploring a physical space, they were interacting with a vast intelligence. Every action, every movement was noted and responded to. Back on the main fleet, discussions grew more intense. Analysts tried to understand the significance of what the exploratory ship was reporting. They debated whether the structure was defensive, cooperative, or simply neutral. Every scenario carried risks, but all agreed that retreat was not a solution. Humans were explorers, and turning back at the first sign of complexity would betray the very nature that had brought them here. The exploratory crew continued mapping, documenting, and scanning. They discovered areas that seemed to defy conventional physics, corridors that bent in impossible ways, spaces that looped back on themselves, and chambers that seemed to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Every discovery challenged their understanding of reality, and yet they adapted, noting patterns, testing hypotheses, and recording results. Each observation was a step closer to understanding the Dominion's logic. At times, the structure reacted to the human presence in ways that were subtle but unmistakable. Sections would shift, energy fields would adjust, and pathways would reconfigure. It was not aggressive, but it was clearly aware. Humans learned quickly that brute force or haste could be disastrous. The only way forward was patience, careful observation, and thoughtful action. They had to anticipate the structure's responses and adapt, not merely follow pre-planned procedures. Despite the challenges, there were moments of awe. Some areas were breathtaking in scale and beauty, with energy flowing in patterns that resembled natural phenomena, yet entirely artificial. Streams of light moved like rivers, rotating platforms floated without visible support, and massive crystalline structures refracted energy into dazzling displays. The humans were reminded of their own capacity for wonder, and they recorded everything meticulously. The central chamber revealed one more surprise. In the heart of the structure was what appeared to be an archive or repository of information. Vast data conduits glowed with knowledge, and interfaces allowed access in ways that humans could begin to understand. It was a treasure trove of the Dominion's history, technology, and logic, stored in forms that challenged human perception. For the first time, the crew realized that they were not merely visitors. They were learning from a civilization that had mastered knowledge in ways humans could only imagine. The realization was humbling. Humans had crossed into the Dominion and faced a system that had endured for centuries, if not millennia. It was intelligent, adaptive, and immensely powerful, yet humans did not retreat. They were careful, observant, and unshaken. They adapted to challenges, respected the intelligence before them, and sought understanding rather than conflict. Their resilience and curiosity allowed them to engage with the Dominion in a way that no other species had. As the exploratory ship returned to the main fleet, data in hand, The mood aboard the ships was a mixture of awe, determination, and pride. They had encountered the unknown, survived, and gathered knowledge that could change humanity's understanding of the galaxy. They had faced a civilization that operated on a scale far beyond their own, and yet they were unshaken. Even as the fleet prepared for the next phase of exploration, every crew member understood that the Dominion was not fully known, and its mysteries were far from solved. They had entered a new chapter in human history, one where intelligence, patience, and courage would be as important as any weapon or shield. And so, with careful planning, cautious optimism, and unshakable determination, humans pressed onward into the Dominion, ready to meet whatever came next. After weeks of cautious exploration, the human fleet had grown more confident in navigating the Dominion. They had mapped strange structures, observed anomalous energy flows, and survived encounters with constructs that seemed to act with intelligence. Yet as the fleet pressed deeper into this uncharted region, the sense of danger grew stronger. The Dominion had remained silent in words, but its presence had become undeniable. There were patterns, subtle tests, and unpredictable events that reminded humans constantly that they were in a place where rules of survival were different. It began with small anomalies. Sensor readings flickered, energy flows shifted, and gravity seemed to behave in ways that made movement difficult. At first, these anomalies were minor and the crews could adjust. But over time, the disruptions became more pronounced. One ship reported that its shields had fluctuated unexpectedly, barely holding against a pulse of energy that came from nowhere. Another detected temporal distortions where clocks ran faster or slower than normal. The Dominion seemed to be responding to their presence, testing them, pushing them to understand limits they had never considered. Despite the growing tension, humans continued forward. They had faced challenges before, from hazardous planets to unpredictable cosmic phenomena, and they had always adapted. The crew understood that fear was dangerous. It could paralyze, distract, or lead to mistakes. Instead, they focused on observation, strategy, and teamwork. Every maneuver was calculated, every sensor reading analyzed, every anomaly documented. Humans were learning to think in ways that no other species could in this space. Then the crisis arrived. Without warning, a massive energy surge rippled through the Dominion, striking one of the smaller ships. Shields flared and pulsed violently, alarms blaring throughout the vessel. Systems began failing, and the crew had to act instantly to stabilize navigation and prevent critical damage. Other ships in the fleet moved quickly to assist, forming protective formations and creating a buffer against further energy pulses. The Dominion was testing them, and the humans understood that hesitation could cost lives. The energy surge was followed by more disturbances. Small constructs, previously passive observers, began to move in coordinated patterns, creating obstacles for the fleet. They were not attacking in a conventional sense, but their presence forced the humans to react, dodge, and rethink their strategies constantly. It was a kind of psychological pressure as much as a physical challenge. Humans had never faced an intelligence that used subtlety, prediction, and patience as weapons. Inside the fleet, crews worked tirelessly to maintain control. Engineers recalibrated shields and energy deflectors, scientists analyzed the anomalies, and pilots adapted flight paths to avoid unpredictable energy pulses. Every person on every ship felt the strain. Long hours, constant vigilance, and the unrelenting unknown tested their endurance. But humans were resilient. They drew on experience, training, and trust in one another. Each challenge met became a lesson learned, and each adaptation built confidence. One of the most difficult aspects of the crisis was understanding what the Dominion wanted. There was no aggression in a traditional sense. No weapons fired, no demands made. It was as if the Dominion was observing, measuring, calculating, and waiting. Humans realized that this intelligence had been operating for millennia, and saw possibilities in ways that were almost impossible for them to grasp. It was not an enemy in the usual sense. It was a challenge of survival, adaptation, and understanding. Communication between ships became more precise and urgent. Every observation, every pattern noticed was shared immediately. The fleet developed new protocols for responding to energy pulses, dodging constructs, and navigating areas where gravity and time behaved unpredictably. Humans were learning in real time, adjusting faster than any prior training could have prepared them for. Their ability to innovate under pressure became their greatest strength. During the height of the crisis, a massive pulse swept through the fleet, larger than anything seen before. Sensors went offline for moments, shields fluctuated wildly, and the crews were forced to rely on instinct coordination and quick thinking. Some feared they might lose ships, others feared losing control over navigation entirely. Yet, even in the face of what seemed like chaos, humans remained focused. They had a way of turning fear into determination, of using uncertainty as fuel for ingenuity. The pulse passed, leaving the fleet battered but intact. Crews took a moment to assess damage, stabilize systems, and regain composure. Engineers worked rapidly to repair shield generators and recalibrate navigation systems. Pilots practiced emergency maneuvers. Scientists reviewed the data, trying to identify patterns in the Dominion's actions. Slowly, the humans began to understand that the crisis was not random. It was deliberate. The Dominion was testing their resilience, creativity, and ability to adapt to unpredictable conditions. This realization brought a sense of clarity. Humans had always thrived when confronted with extreme challenges. The deserts of distant planets, the storms of uninhabitable worlds, the hazards of space travel, these had all prepared them for this moment. The Dominion's methods were different, more subtle and more intelligent than anything they had faced. But the human mind could think, adapt, and innovate in ways the Dominion did not anticipate. They had learned that unpredictability could be an advantage. Over the following days, the fleet continued to navigate the Dominion with renewed focus. They developed new strategies to cope with the energy surges and constructs. They moved in patterns that were intentionally irregular, changed speeds, and varied sensor emissions to make their actions harder to predict. Each adjustment, each innovation was a small victory. Humans were discovering that even against a civilization or system far beyond their understanding, their ability to adapt and improvise gave them an edge. At the same time, the psychological strain remained. The unending unknown weighed on the crew. Some struggled with fear, others with doubt or exhaustion. Leaders emphasized teamwork, communication, and focus. Every decision was reinforced with logic and analysis, every maneuver supported by collaboration. Humans understood that their greatest strength was not technology alone, but unity, trust, and persistence. Another challenge came unexpectedly. A sudden shift in energy fields caused a temporary, but intense distortion of space around the fleet. Navigation instruments went haywire, and the ships were forced into emergency maneuvers to avoid collision. The event lasted only minutes, but it left the crew shaken. Yet the human response was immediate and effective. They adjusted shields, recalibrated sensors, and worked together to stabilize movement. By the end of the event, every ship was intact, systems functioning, and the fleet had adapted to the unpredictable conditions. The crisis had taught the humans something important. Survival in the Dominion would not come from aggression, speed, or sheer force. It would come from observation, innovation, patience, and understanding. Humans were learning to respond in ways the Dominion had not anticipated. Every test, every obstacle, every anomaly became a lesson. The fleet was evolving not in technology alone, but in strategy, teamwork, and resilience. As the fleet pressed onward after the crisis, morale began to shift. Crew members felt pride in their adaptability, confidence in their unity, and a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced extreme challenges, survived, and learned. The Dominion's presence was no longer merely a source of fear. It was a puzzle, a vast intelligence that demanded careful thought and ingenuity. Humans were ready to meet it on its own terms, and they knew that they could. In the quiet moments, crew members reflected on what they had experienced. They had crossed into a region no human had ever entered, faced an intelligence beyond comprehension, and endured challenges that tested every skill and every nerve. They had discovered the limits of technology, strategy, and courage, and had pushed beyond them. It was not easy, and it was far from over, but humans had proven they could survive even the most unpredictable conditions. By the end of this phase of the mission, the fleet had regained stability. Systems were repaired, shields reinforced, and crew members rested. But the memory of the crisis lingered. Every pulse, every anomaly, every construct encounter was a reminder that the Dominion was not simply space. It was a test. And humans, as they had always done, were determined to meet the test without fear. They understood now that the Dominion would not be conquered by force. It would not be defeated by speed or numbers. It required patience, intelligence, and ingenuity. Humans were learning these lessons in real time, and each day brought new insight, new confidence, and a renewed sense of determination. The crisis had strengthened them, sharpened their minds, and united the fleet in purpose, and so, with vigilance, adaptability, and unwavering resolve, humans continued their journey deeper into the Dominion. They were unshaken, prepared to face whatever came next and ready to learn from the intelligence that watched, tested, and responded. Every obstacle became a step forward, every challenge a lesson in survival, and every moment a testament to the human spirit. After surviving the intense challenges of the Dominion, the human fleet had grown stronger, wiser, and more united. The previous crises had tested their skills, endurance, and teamwork. Every crew member knew that the Dominion was vast, intelligent, and unpredictable. Yet even in the face of such overwhelming forces, humans pressed onward. Curiosity, determination, and a refusal to retreat drove them deeper into the unknown. It was during one of these explorations that the fleet made a discovery that would change everything. On long-range sensors, a signal appeared, subtle, structured, and unmistakably artificial. Unlike the energy pulses and moving constructs they had encountered before, this signal was constant and coherent. It was as if something deep within the Dominion was attempting to communicate. The human commanders convened quickly to plan the approach. There was excitement tempered with caution. They had learned the importance of patience. Rushing forward could trigger unforeseen consequences. As the fleet moved closer, the signal became clearer. It emanated from a massive structure, larger than anything humans had seen before. Its surface pulsed with energy, and strange geometric patterns glimmered faintly in the void. Sensors detected intricate networks inside the structure, channels of energy connecting one section to another, in ways that suggested intelligence and purpose. Humans realized they were approaching what could be considered the heart of the Dominion. A smaller exploratory vessel was dispatched once again, moving cautiously into the unknown. The crew aboard felt a mixture of awe and tension. They had seen strange phenomena before, but nothing like this. The structure seemed alive, almost organic in its design. Walls shifted subtly, corridors extended in ways that seemed impossible, and energy flows responded to the ship's movement. It was as if the Dominion itself was aware of every step they took, guiding them, testing them, and perhaps even inviting them to discover its secrets. Inside the structure, the exploratory crew made their first real breakthrough. They discovered an archive, a repository of data and knowledge stored in a form that was unlike any human system. Vast streams of energy carried information, flowing like rivers through the chamber. Interfaces glimmered, waiting to be understood. For the first time, humans felt that they were not merely exploring, they were learning. They had entered a system that had endured for millennia, a civilization that had transcended physical limitations, and now they could access its knowledge. The data revealed astonishing insights. The Dominion was not simply a collection of machines or structures. It was a civilization that had evolved beyond conventional life. Its intelligence was vast, distributed across countless nodes, capable of processing information at speeds far beyond human comprehension. Time, space, and energy were tools the Dominion used with precision. It had observed countless species, cataloged civilizations, and adapted to changes in the galaxy over eons. Humans were not the first to enter this space, but they might be the first to interact with it in a meaningful way. The crew carefully studied the knowledge they could access. They learned about the Dominion's history, its structure, and its methods of observation. Some of the data hinted at encounters with other species that had entered the Dominion and never returned. This realization brought a sobering thought. Humans were truly in a place of immense power. Yet instead of fear, the crew felt determination. They had faced danger, adapted to unpredictability, and survived. They could engage with the Dominion not by force, but by intelligence, patience, and understanding. Back on the fleet, discussions grew more intense. Analysts reviewed every detail from the exploratory vessel, piecing together patterns and histories. Every new insight was carefully considered, debated, and used to adjust strategies. The human fleet realized that the Dominion operated on principles that were foreign to conventional thinking. It was not hostile in the traditional sense, but it was vigilant, calculating, and persistent. Understanding these principles was key to survival and progress. The discovery also had a profound effect on morale. Crew members felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were not merely travelers or explorers. They were learners engaging with a civilization that had transcended ordinary existence. Every observation, every pattern recognized was a step toward understanding a system that had endured for eons. Humans were discovering their place in a galaxy that was far older and more complex than they had imagined. The fleet began to experiment with communication methods. Using carefully controlled energy signals, they attempted to interact with the Dominion in ways that went beyond simple observation. At first there was no response. Then slowly subtle changes began to appear. Corridors within the structures shifted slightly, energy flows adjusted, and constructs altered their behavior in ways that suggested comprehension. Humans realized they had not only found knowledge, they had initiated contact. The process required patience. The Dominion did not operate on human time frames. It processed information, calculated possibilities, and responded with precision. Humans learned that sudden or erratic actions could be counterproductive. Instead, they needed to observe, analyze, and act in measured ways. Every adjustment, every test, every interaction was recorded meticulously. Humans understood that they were shaping the nature of their engagement with this intelligence, and that careful action was as important as courage. One of the most remarkable discoveries came from the archive itself. The Dominion's knowledge included information about the universe, advanced energy manipulation, and theories of space and time that humans had never imagined. Some of it was immediately useful: ways to stabilize ships against energy distortions, techniques to navigate unpredictable gravitational fields, and insights into the behavior of constructs. Other knowledge was more abstract, offering glimpses into a civilization that had evolved beyond ordinary limits. Humans realized they were standing at the edge of understanding a level of intelligence and capability that could redefine their place in the galaxy. The fleet adapted quickly. Strategies evolved based on the information obtained. Pilots adjusted flight patterns to anticipate subtle energy shifts. Engineers implemented methods to enhance shields against anomalous forces. Scientists continued to study and interpret the Dominion's data, translating abstract knowledge into practical applications. Humans were learning not just to survive, but to thrive in this environment. Despite the progress, challenges remained. The Dominion continued to test the fleet, sending unpredictable energy pulses, shifting corridors, and observing every movement. Humans had learned to respond, but the intelligence remained elusive, vast, and mysterious. It was a reminder that no matter how much knowledge they acquired, the Dominion's full nature was beyond immediate comprehension. Patience and perseverance were essential. During moments of rest, crew members reflected on what they had achieved. They had faced a system older and more powerful than any known civilization. They had survived crises, adapted to energy anomalies, and discovered a repository of knowledge that could transform humanity's understanding of the galaxy. It was overwhelming yet exhilarating. Every human aboard the fleet felt the weight and significance of their journey. They were part of a story that had never been written, a chapter in the history of both humans and the Dominion itself. As the fleet prepared for further exploration, plans were made to send additional vessels into the structure. These ships would explore deeper levels of the Dominion's network, continue to gather knowledge, and attempt further interaction with the intelligence. The humans understood that patience, observation, and careful strategy were the keys to success. Every step would be deliberate, every movement calculated, and every action weighed for potential consequences. The interaction with the Dominion was changing humanity. Crew members began thinking in new ways, considering possibilities and patterns that had been unimaginable before. They had learned to anticipate unpredictable forces, to act with precision, and to innovate when confronted with challenges that defied conventional logic. The fleet was evolving not only in skill and knowledge but in understanding of the universe itself. By the end of this phase, humans had achieved something extraordinary. They had entered a region of space no one else had touched, faced a civilization that had transcended ordinary existence, and begun to engage with its intelligence. They had survived crises, adapted to unpredictability, and discovered knowledge that could change their understanding of energy, time, and space. Most importantly, they had done so as humans, curious, resilient, and unshaken. Even as they prepared for the next stage, one thought remained constant among the fleet. The Dominion was vast, intelligent, and mysterious, but humans had proven that courage, patience, and ingenuity could open doors that seemed impossible to approach. They had discovered that survival and understanding were inseparable, and that every challenge faced was a step toward greater knowledge. Humans pressed onward, determined to explore deeper, learn more, and continue interacting with the Dominion in ways that would shape the future. Every pulse of energy, every corridor, every construct became part of a larger story, a story of resilience, curiosity, and unshakable spirit. Humans had crossed into the Dominion, faced its intelligence, and survived. They were learning, adapting, and after weeks of careful exploration, the human fleet had grown stronger, more confident, and wiser. Each crew member had experienced moments of fear, awe, and wonder. They had crossed into a region no human had ever entered, faced a vast intelligence, survived unpredictable crises, and discovered knowledge that could reshape their understanding of the galaxy. Yet the greatest challenge still lay ahead. The Dominion was vast, intelligent, and patient, and humans were about to face the ultimate test of endurance, adaptation, and ingenuity. The warning signs appeared first as subtle anomalies. Energy patterns shifted unpredictably, constructs moved with renewed purpose, and sections of the vast Dominion structure seemed to pulse in anticipation. Humans sensed a change in the environment, though it was impossible to define precisely what it meant. Communication across the fleet became more urgent. Every observation was shared, every pattern analyzed, and every unusual signal treated with caution. Humans had learned that in the Dominion, even the smallest detail could carry meaning. The fleet approached a central hub within the Dominion, a massive node from which energy flowed in intricate and beautiful patterns. It was clear this was a critical part of the system, a place that connected countless networks and held immense intelligence. Sensors indicated that the energy here was more intense, more focused, and more reactive. It was as if the Dominion itself was aware of the human presence, and had concentrated its attention on them. Every move now required precision, coordination, and careful observation. A smaller exploratory ship was sent first, its crew trained for moments like this. The vessel moved cautiously, every maneuver calculated to minimize risk and maximize data collection. Inside the central hub, the ship's sensors recorded phenomena that challenged human understanding. Energy streams flowed like rivers of light, bending and twisting in ways that defied conventional physics. Platforms floated without visible support, rotating slowly in synchronized patterns. Every corridor seemed alive, responding to the presence of the humans with subtle shifts and pulses of energy. The Dominion's response became more pronounced. Constructs that had previously observed now acted more decisively, forming moving patterns that blocked certain paths while opening others. Energy surges became stronger, testing shields and navigation systems. Humans had faced crises before, but this was different. The intelligence they were dealing with was not only reactive, it was anticipatory. It was calculating, learning, and adapting to their strategies in real time. Every decision mattered. Within the fleet, crews worked tirelessly. Engineers reinforced shields, recalibrated sensors, and ensured all systems functioned under extreme conditions. Scientists analyzed energy flows and predicted construct movements. Pilots adapted flight paths, often taking unconventional routes to avoid areas of high energy or interference. It was a test of every skill humans had developed over centuries of exploration and survival. Even under pressure, they remained focused, patient, and determined. The exploratory ship reached the heart of the central hub, a chamber larger than any human city, filled with streams of energy flowing in intricate networks. It was beautiful, overwhelming, and disorienting. The energy pulses seemed to carry information, patterns that were both random and deliberate. The crew realized that they were not simply observing, they were interacting with the intelligence itself. Every action, every movement was being registered, processed, and responded to. Suddenly, a massive energy surge erupted from the central node. It was unlike anything humans had encountered. Shields flared, sensors spiked, and instruments went into overload. The pulse swept through the hub, testing navigation, reaction time, and coordination. Crew members had to rely on instinct, training, and teamwork to stabilize the ship. The surge passed, leaving the vessel intact but shaken. It was a reminder that the Dominion was not hostile in the conventional sense, but its power and intelligence were undeniable. Humans quickly adapted. They analyzed the surge, identified patterns, and adjusted strategies. The fleet learned to anticipate pulses, to navigate complex energy flows, and to use unpredictability to their advantage. The Dominion was intelligent, but humans had learned to think in ways it could not fully predict. Patience, observation, and innovation became their greatest tools. Every move was deliberate, every response calculated, and every risk weighed against potential knowledge gained. As the fleet explored deeper, the central hub revealed a vast archive of knowledge. It was unlike any data repository humans had ever encountered. Energy flows carried information in patterns that could be translated with careful analysis. The knowledge included advanced understanding of energy manipulation, navigation through extreme gravitational fields, and insights into the behavior of the Dominion constructs. For the humans, it was a treasure trove, a key to understanding a civilization far older and more advanced than their own. Yet the challenge was far from over. The Dominion continued to test them. Energy pulses became more frequent, pathways shifted unpredictably, and constructs moved in coordinated formations designed to challenge strategy and coordination. Humans realized that this was not mere defense, it was a final test, a way to measure adaptability, patience, and resilience. Every crew member felt the pressure, but they also felt a sense of purpose. They were not intruders. They were participants in a cosmic interaction, learning from and engaging with an intelligence beyond comprehension. The fleet worked together like never before. Every decision was communicated, every observation shared instantly, and every action coordinated. Humans relied on trust, training, and ingenuity to navigate the challenges. Engineers developed new methods to stabilize shields, pilots executed precise maneuvers, and scientists translated energy patterns into actionable strategies. Every obstacle became a lesson, every anomaly an opportunity to understand more about the Dominion's logic. In the heart of the central hub, the exploratory ship detected a final, massive data stream. It contained a history of the Dominion, records of civilizations that had entered its space, and insights into the evolution of intelligence and energy on a galactic scale. Humans realized that the Dominion was not merely a civilization, it was a system of intelligence, observation, and adaptation that had endured for eons. And now humans were part of that history. The final test came unexpectedly. A surge of energy, far stronger than any previous, swept through the central hub. Constructs moved with extraordinary precision, blocking pathways and forcing the fleet into complex maneuvers. Shields strained, sensors flickered, and the crews were pushed to their limits. Every decision had to be perfect. One misstep could result in damage or loss of vessels. Yet humans remained calm, focused, and unshaken. They had faced uncertainty, crises, and overwhelming power before, and they had adapted every time. Through careful coordination, observation, and ingenuity, the fleet navigated the final challenge. They used patterns, timing, and unpredictability to move through the surge, stabilizing ships and avoiding the most intense energy flows. Engineers monitored shields, pilots executed precise movements, and scientists interpreted every signal in real time. Slowly, the energy subsided, the constructs paused, and the central hub became calm. Humans had passed the ultimate test. The Dominion, vast and intelligent, had acknowledged their presence and endurance. The fleet remained intact, systems functioning, and knowledge acquired. It was a victory not of force but of patience, understanding, and human ingenuity. Every crew member felt the significance of the moment. They had faced a civilization beyond comprehension, adapted to extreme challenges, and survived unshaken. The fleet spent the following days exploring the calm central hub. Energy streams flowed gently, constructs moved predictably, and the systems were stable. Humans accessed the archives, learning about energy manipulation, advanced navigation, and the evolution of intelligence across the galaxy. They realized that the Dominion had not only tested them, it had provided them with tools and knowledge to thrive in a universe far larger and more complex than they had imagined. Morale across the fleet was high. Crew members felt pride, awe, and determination. They had crossed into the Dominion, faced its intelligence, survived crises, and gained knowledge that would shape humanity's future. Every challenge had strengthened them. Every obstacle had taught them something new. and every moment had proven the resilience and ingenuity of the human spirit. Even as they prepared to leave the central hub, humans understood that the Dominion remained vast and mysterious. There were still areas unexplored, secrets hidden, and knowledge waiting to be discovered. Yet the fleet had learned the most important lesson. Courage, patience, observation, and adaptability could meet even the greatest challenges. Humans had faced the unknown, and they were unshaken. As the fleet began its gradual journey back toward familiar space, crew members reflected on what they had achieved. They had entered a region no human had ever reached, interacted with a civilization beyond comprehension, survived unprecedented crises, and gained knowledge that could redefine their understanding of the galaxy. Every action, every decision, and every adaptation had been a testament to the human spirit. The Dominion had tested them, challenged them, and observed them. And humans had responded not with aggression, fear,